Good morning and welcome to today's Masterclass Minis, Presenting with Impact. My name is Catherine Wilson and I will be your moderator for today's session, and I'll introduce you shortly to Isobel Rimmer, who will be your facilitator. Because of the number of people on the webinar today, you will be in listen-only mode. But we still welcome your questions, and these can be typed into the chat panel in the dashboard. And I will put as many of them forward to Isobel as I can. Today's session is just a short taster to show you what we do here at Masterclass and to share with you our top tips for presenting. Our 1 hour session on presenting with impact is taking place on the 24th of April at 11 a.m. So please do join us for this if you like what you see today. The cost of that webinar is at a greatly reduced price of $29.99, and this can be purchased by visiting our website at masterclass.co.uk. We would really like it if you tweeted your attendance at today's session. Just use the hashtag with Masterclass Minis so we can track them all. Also, please do follow us on Twitter, as you'll be tweeting further sessions and useful giveaways. Right, so let's get down to business, and over to you, Isobel.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome everybody here today to this session. I'm going to start talking about a topic that is pretty much up there with most people. In fact, the majority of people are extremely anxious about speaking in public, and for some actually it's their greatest fear. In fact, there's a word for it. It's called glossophobia. So I don't know if you suffer from that. But what we thought we would do, just to get things moving along, is to run a short poll, and what you have to do here is you have to vote. So voting on these, which do you think is the greatest fear that people have? And what this means is that you can go in and you can vote, and it's anonymous, so you're quite safe to vote and put whatever you think might be the one. And let's see how it goes. So well over half of you have voted already. That's fantastic. Thank you. Keep voting, and we'll close it in a few moments. And we're nearly there. Just a few more to go. Always great when you're running a webinar to run a poll early on, because it does test A, the technology, and B, whether people are awake. So that's why we like to do it too. So it looks like a lot of people are out there and awake, so that's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and show you the results. So the results are as follows. So 20% of you see spiders as your greatest fear, 34% death, only 1% darkness and twilight, and 45% around public speaking. And you're right, because you will find that bizarrely, and I do think this is bizarre, that people are more frightened of speaking in public than they are indeed of death. But actually I was quite surprised when I was doing the research on this, actually quite how many people are frightened of darkness and twilight. It's a surprisingly high number. So what are you going to get out of attending this session today? Well, what we want to show you is some very simple techniques that you can use straight away in any presentation that you do. Now that could be speaking to a small group or a large group, or equally you can apply some of this when you're working online or doing a virtual session or a webinar, or even attending a conference call and you want to get your point across. So lots of things that you can use from today. I've been doing this kind of work for over 20 years. I work with all sorts of people, business leaders, chief executives, and a lot of politicians. More on that. I've helped bid teams with multi-million-pound pitches. One team that I coached concluded a £1 billion 10-year contract, and that was down to the last 20-minute presentation to the board of the client. And I've worked with a lot of politicians, both on the campaign trail as well as coaching them for programs like Question Time or being on the Today program. And I'm having a lot of fun at the moment because I'm working as a pundit with Sky News. Some of you might have seen the little video clip. And we're looking at body language and impact and presentation techniques on all the politicians, and that's been really fun. So over the next few weeks I'll be doing a lot of that. And we actually have a program that we've developed called Powerful Presence, which looks very specifically at how to present with impact every time. So what I'm going to do over the next 20 minutes is just look at a couple of areas really, how to manage your nerves, how to have some structure, how to work on your voice, and really so that you can be more confident anytime you're asked to stand up and speak. And that's my aim for you for today. So you might have noticed something that I did in those last few minutes. What I did was I used an introduction technique called ABCD, and I'll explain what that is and how it works. Because if you think about it, when are you most likely to be nervous? Well, most of the people I work with, it's at the start. You know, the nerves are running, the adrenaline's pumping. And for some people, it's also at the end when they worry about what questions they're going to get, or they worry that they won't get any questions. And that's why planning and preparing and knowing where you're going and what you're going to say from the get-go is so important. And this is my really simple tip for introductions. Anyone can remember it. A, B, C, D. Stands for attention, benefit to the audience, credentials of the speaker, and direction, where we're going to go. So let me just show you how I used this with you just now. I got you talking and thinking by talking about the fear that people have around public speaking. We ran a little poll. So I hopefully got some attention, I got your interest, I got you tuned in, listening and ready to engage and getting used to my voice as well. Then I said, here's some things that I'm going to give you. And it's important that early on in your session that you demonstrate some real value to your audience. It's all about them, even though you're the one who's probably feeling nervous. Then I might say a little bit about who I am and why I'm qualified to talk about this subject or this topic. And I gave you some examples in that. And then the D of my direction is, where are we going? And I said to you, over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you some techniques. So the benefit of having A, B, C, D right up front is that you can prepare it, you can rehearse it, you can know exactly what it is you're going to say, and at the time when you're most likely to be most nervous, you've got it ready, you've got it sussed. Now, some of you might say, well, hang on a minute, Isobel, why are you saying your credentials at number 3, quite a way in? Well, I hate to break it to you, people are more interested in themselves than they are about the speaker. And it's a much more logical sequence. If I get your attention, I get you tuned in because there's something of interest or benefit to you, then you're more likely to remember who I am when I talk about me and what I've done. If you introduce yourself right at the start with your name and who you are, most people aren't tuned in and they won't remember any of it. So that feels a little bit odd. Trust me, it works. It's a much more logical sequence for the audience. Now, people often ask me if I get nervous when presenting it, and yes, absolutely I do. And it's something that I think every presenter, apparently even Judi Dench, gets real stage nerves and can be throwing up backstage. So here's a little photograph of me aged 5, and I'm quite cute really. I haven't changed much at all. But what I think is interesting, I found my old school reports. My parents had kept them all. And this is what my nursery teacher said about me, about verse speaking. I clearly enjoyed it at the time. I have no memory of that at all. I don't remember being particularly fond of poetry or even fond of speaking out loud. But I do remember hating speaking in public. And through university, I still felt very nervous if I had to speak or present at a tutorial. But by using some of these techniques and working with trainers early in my career, I've learned to enjoy it. But yes, of course I still get nervous, but I'm going to help you with some of the techniques that I use, because if I can do it, then absolutely you can. So we're going to look at two things. We're going to look at structure and a little bit around practice and preparation. And we're also going to look at how you can plan and prepare and rehearse. And the other thing to think about is a little bit around perseverance, because the only way you can improve and get better at presenting or speaking, be it in public, be it to small audiences, is to find opportunities to do it and to put yourself out there and be brave. Now, very often I'll get the phone call and it'll be something around the lines of, Isobel, we've got a speaker, or someone's going to be doing an important pitch or whatever. And usually it's because they're nervous or they want to have more confidence. And that's the starting point. I say, oh, can you help me do it with more confidence? But, the main reason people are nervous is they don't really know where they're going. So I always start with structure, giving people, if you like, a roadmap. And it's the same is true when we're driving. If we know where we're going and we hit a bit of traffic or we hit a problem on the route, if we know where we're going, we've got a map, we can do a detour. And the same is true when you're presenting. And if you're interested in knowing a bit more about how we structure and how we prepare, then do join us, as Catherine said, next Friday, week Friday, where we'll be doing a 60-minute webinar. And the information's on the website if you want to look at that. So let's get into this whole thing about how we handle nerves and some practical ways of handling nerves. I'm sure you all remember your Shakespeare. Slightly changed here. To breathe or not to breathe, that is the question. Well, of course we all know how to breathe. I mean, you think that's obvious. But actually, do we? And do we know how to breathe in a way that will not only project our voice, but also help us to manage our nerves? Now, if any of you have ever seen a baby scream or heard a baby scream, you'll know that they can scream for ages and belt out an enormous amount of noise and not actually strain their voices. And the reason the baby can do that is that they are breathing from their diaphragm. And actually most of us breathe not from our diaphragm as much as we should, but from our upper respiratory tract. Now if I talk to you now, and I move up into my upper respiratory tract, so I'm not breathing from my diaphragm, you'll notice that my voice has got harsher and shriller, and actually it's quite a strain for me to speak properly. And that's because I'm breathing up here. So we need to find a way to really breathe from our diaphragm. Those of you that have done singing or scuba diving, you must have been taught this. But here are a couple of ways that you can do it right now. If you've got space where you are, lie on the floor. That's a fantastic way of doing it. If you haven't, you can just slump over your desk. And don't go to sleep yet, or at least not until we've finished. So if you're sitting at your desk, just lean slightly forward. If it's appropriate to, you can just put your knees slightly further apart. Just lean slightly forward, and I'll do it as well. And find your diaphragm. It's the largest muscle in your body, contrary to popular belief of other things. And if you put your hand on it, or both hands, I'll see if I can do it with both hands, as you lean forward and breathe, if you've got your fingertips just touching, as you breathe out with your diaphragm, we're all doing it in here, you'll find your fingers splay a little bit. If you're breathing from your upper respiratory tract, all that will happen is your shoulders will go up. But if you breathe from your diaphragm. Now, the reason I've put the diagram on the left-hand side lying on the floor, some people find it easier to really find their diaphragm and breathe and relax lying down. So a bit difficult to do that when you're on the webinar, but you might want to try that later. But breathing from your diaphragm is so useful, because then not only do you project your voice, but you also calm your nerves. So just try practicing that. Now, adrenaline is a great thing. It's the adrenaline that's pumping around your body. It's a hormone that's giving you that nervous energy. But we also want it because it gives us enthusiasm, it gives us presence, it gives us dynamism. So we want some adrenaline, but we don't want too much. So good presenters have energy, but they're not bouncing out of their chair, or their hands aren't shaking, or their knees aren't shaking. So a bit like the hokey cokey in this cartoon here, the best way to get rid of that adrenaline is literally to shake it out. And you can shake it out through your hands. I'm doing that now. A bit like if you've washed your hands and you're drying them, just shake them out. And you can also do it with your feet. Just be careful you don't kick anybody. Because what you're doing is you are physically shaking out the adrenaline. So if you're going to be speaking, or you're going to be going on stage, or you're going to be standing up in a meeting room, just find a little way to either shake your hands or shake your feet before you speak. And that will release the adrenaline long enough to do your first few sentences, by which point you've got into the rhythm of what you're going to do. And, of course, you'll be breathing beautifully. That'd be great. So the next thing I want to share with you is I call this my countdown technique. And it's a way of getting your voice to the right pitch. Those of you that have been around a little bit longer, you'll remember Maggie Thatcher's voice changed quite dramatically as she became Prime Minister, and it went a lot deeper. And she was coached, of course she was coached, most politicians are. But this is a technique that you can try to get your voice to the pitch that has presence and resonance and allows you to really project. And the way I do it, and again you can try this with me if you're in a quiet or secluded spot, or just have a go at doing it later. And what you do, you start at 10 and you count down, taking your voice down. So 10, 9, 8, I'm coming down lower, 7, now 6, I'm struggling at 6. If I go to 5, it's too deep. I'm not going to be able to talk at that level. 4, no. Back up to 5, 6. I'm probably comfortable around about 6 or 7. If you go too deep, you'll strain. If you're up at 10 or 9, probably a little bit too high. And again, you can practice that so that you start to find the pitch at which you can project your voice in a clear and nice, comfortable way, but with resonance. So have a go at doing that at some point as well. If you haven't seen the film The King's Speech, honestly do. There's some fantastic things in there, and the way the king is shown how to speak with confidence and not to stammer. And some of the techniques that I share when I'm coaching people, here's a few for you to try, again, now with me or later. The first one is what I call pa, ba, ta, da, and you're working on your consonants. So you're warming up your voice, you're getting your lips, your tongue, your mouth moving. And you can do it fast, you can do it slow, pa, ba, ta, da. And you just work it to get the mouth and the lips moving. Then you can really start to work the words. So this makes sure that you're speaking clearly. And again, you can try some of these. 11 benevolent elephants. Girl gargoyle. Guy gargoyle. And one of the actors' favourites, Peggy Babcock. You'll hear actors using that one quite often. So again, you're warming up your voice so that you can speak, breathing from your diaphragm in a really strong way. One of the other giveaways about nerves is it often leaks out, if you like, in the way we stand. So I always encourage people to stand at what I call 10 to 2. So your feet are hip width apart. I know, ladies, your hips are not that wide, hip width apart, and with your toes at 10 to 2, so slightly pointed out. Those of you that have done ballet, it's not first or second position, it's kind of halfway between the two. And that gives you strength in your core because you're not crossing your feet, you're not putting one foot in front of the other, you're not leaning on one hip. And that's a thing that people often make the mistake of. I have my lovely picture here. When we're nervous, we often try and make ourselves a little bit smaller. And women tend to do this more than men. They tend to cross their feet over when they're talking. Well, actually, it's not a good idea because it makes you very unbalanced. So remember that stance, that 10 to 2 position, because that's a great way of having good posture and having strength in your position as well. Then I would encourage you to grow tall through your spine. Now, this isn't about bringing your shoulders up and getting tense. It's about growing tall through your spine in a very elegant way. I often encourage people to imagine that your spine is like a series of cotton reels with a thread pulling very gently up through them. If any of you have tried Alexander technique, again, a great way to have lovely posture when you're speaking. The next one is tighten your buttocks. Everyone's going, ooh, what's she on about here? But only slightly, only slightly. If you're standing and you tighten your buttocks just a little bit, don't clench them, please, what will happen is that you will bring your stomach muscles and the diaphragm will come in, and again, you can grow tall. It's very difficult to slump if you've got your buttocks slightly tightened. but only slightly. Don't go too mad. And then, as I said earlier, shake out your hands. So you're growing tall, you're looking beautiful, you're looking elegant, and then you shake out your hands. Now, you might say, well, yeah, that's all very well, Isobel, if I'm standing, but there'll be times when I'm presenting and I'm seated, or I'm on a conference call, or I'm in a boardroom and I'm sitting around. It's not appropriate for me to stand up. I get that completely. So this is our technique called BBC. I'm not talking about the BBC voice. I'm talking to the technique taught to all broadcasters, bottom to back of chair. So again, you could try that now. If you're sitting somewhere, just take your bottom to the back of your chair, and you can grow tall through your spine. If you want to relax, you can sit back, but you're not slumping. And if you want to lean forward, you're engaged, but you're not perched at the end of the seat. And the interesting thing about this is that when we're nervous, more often than not, we sit right on the edge of the seat because we want to be able to get away. So think about BBC, bottom to back of chair, every time you're in that seated position. Now, I talked about this on Sky the other day. The best way to get good at doing something, of course, is to practice. And we need to practice, we need to rehearse, but we also need to get feedback, because practice alone doesn't make perfect. Practice alone makes habit, and the habit may not be good. So we need to practice, get feedback, and then practice again. Now, one way of doing this, if you're going to be presenting and you want to get it absolutely right, what I tend to do is I will video the person who's presenting, so they do it for real, but in front of a camera, and you can video it on an iPhone or whatever these days, that's fine. And then when we come to play it back, the first thing I do is I'll say we play it back at fast forward speed. Drop the sound, because otherwise you sound like Mickey Mouse. But what we're looking for there, any obvious, what I call tics, any obvious body language things that are going on. Cameron, for example, has a tendency to chop with his hand. So that's something we looked at on Sky the other day. Miliband has a tendency to sort of close his eyes and look left and right. And when you speed it up, you'll see those tics or those potentially irritating things at speed. Then what I say is, now play it back, but don't listen to the voice. Most people don't like their voices. I don't like my voice. I hear it on an answer phone, oh, it sounds horrible. They go, no, that's you. But most of us don't like our voices. So when you play it back the second time without the sound, what we're looking to see is this person compelling? Is this person interesting? Are they engaging? Is the eye contact good? And for people who struggle with that, one of the things that I often do is I get them to tell a joke or a funny story. And I play back and I say, look how you look when you're telling something funny or engaging or something that's interesting. Now, that's the look I want when you want to have that real presence. Then what I do, as I get them to play them back just with the sound. So we can work on the voice, we can work on the pitch, we can work on any issues, like maybe there are some fillers going on. By fillers, I mean things like or or maybe, or whatever it might be. And then finally, I say, okay, I'll let you watch right the way through normally. And by then, they're used to their voice, they're used to seeing themselves on screen, and they're much more objective about what they're seeing and what they're hearing. So the importance of rehearsing, absolutely critical. So there you are, preparation and practice, and of course perseverance, and just a few simple techniques that you can use to overcome nerves when you're speaking. So with that, we're going to hand back to Catherine, and if there are any questions that have come through, we'll take those now.
And thank you very much, Isobel, for a very informative, fun session. And if you, as I said earlier, if you'd like what you heard today, then our next paid-for webinar on Presenting with Impact is on the 24th of April. I'll put some of our upcoming webinars up on the screen for you now. Also, with this Presenting with Impact, we also do deliver one-day training courses within companies for Presenting with Impact and advanced presentation skills. And our upcoming workshops, we have a 2-day leadership challenge course coming up on the 20th and 21st of May. That's to do with the Cousins and Posner and the LPI 360. And we also have a one-day course, the Introduction to Management. So if you require any more further information on this, then please do give me a call or contact me on catherine.wilson@masterclass.co.uk. Now, while I'm here, we've got quite a few questions come in. So we have one from a lady who's asked, Isobel, how do you control a dry mouth or going bright red when you're doing a presentation?
I think we've all been there. So any of you that are thinking, oh, yes. Well, a few tips. Water. Well, you will get a dry mouth, and that's perfectly normal and perfectly natural. Drink water. Don't drink coffee. Don't drink tea, because particularly coffee, it's a diuretic. And if you ever watch breakfast television and things, or those sort of daytime TV programs, you'll see that they have orange juice on the coffee tables. You'll also notice that none of the speakers or presenters ever drink it, because it's very citric and it makes you sort of salivate and makes it worse. So water is the thing to do. Drink plenty of water. The other thing to do is, if you think you're going to go bright red, there is makeup that can help you with that. So there's green tone under foundation that you can wear. But the key thing is to breathe, relax, rehearse. And the more you do it, the less you'll go red. When I work with female presenters, very often when they're nervous, their face may go slightly red. We can deal with that with the makeup, but also their chest or their neck can go quite red as well. If you think that happens to you, just wear a high neck shirt or something that covers up your neck. Generally for men it's less of a problem because they're wearing a shirt and tie or they're wearing a high collar. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. Now, I hope that answered your question. And we'll talk a bit more about questioning techniques on the webinar next week if you're interested in how to handle them. And I'm just looking at some other questions here. We've got one about, is it okay to use notes? Yes, Nicola, it is absolutely okay to use notes. A lot of debate about that with Miliband and the fact that he talked for an hour without notes, but unfortunately forgot to mention the deficit. Oops. The thing about working without notes entirely is you do risk forgetting something. What I often do is, if I've got a client that wants to talk about sort of 3 or 4 key topics, we will use an anchoring technique. And in fact, I think, Steve, you've suggested that too, where we'll say, right, there are 3 things we're going to talk about in this session, and we use various anchoring techniques. Sometimes I just use the thumb, the first finger, and the second finger, and 1, 2, 3. And that way, we help people to remember the key points. There's also some visualizing techniques that you can use so that you create a picture of what it is you're going to talk about, and then you're much more able to remember it. Again, we can talk about that, and we do that in company sessions as well. Someone said, how do I stop the need to clear my throat? Right, more water. It's probably a nervous thing. Most of us have some kind of nervous tic, whether it's clearing our throat, whether it's saying or It's about working through it and breathing. If you video and watch yourself back, you may find that you're doing it less than you think you are, or you can identify when it's happening and why, and then be able to do something about it. If you feel the need to put some kind of filler, whether it's excuse me, or whatever, pause, silence, imagine that you're reading a script and there's a full stop, and the most natural thing to do is to pause. And that's all you need to do. And just look at, lots of questions coming in. We'll try and answer as many of them as we can. How do we deal with a trembly voice? Again, breathing, 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 and practice. There are professional voice coaches out there. I'm not a professional voice coach in the sense of elocution or trained in the physiology of it, but there are many, and we have one of our trainers who is a professional voice coach who is fantastic. And she can do impersonations of almost any famous person simply because she knows how their voice and their mouth works. It's amazing. So if you feel you need some more help on that, absolutely get professional help. It's well worth it, because presenting and being able to speak and to be able to do it confidently is such an important part of our toolkit in business and work today. Oh gosh, there's more coming on. What if I freeze on stage? Or what do I do if my hands go wild? All right, we'll get all sorts of things happening here. Okay, that's the benefit of having your notes. If you freeze on stage, but you know where you're going, and you've got a plan, and you've got a direction, you know you're going to talk about 2 or 3 key points, you can have your cards in front of you with your 2 or 3 key points, and if you freeze, and we've all done it, I've done it too, you pause, you breathe, you refer to your notes, and you carry on. The audience don't know unless you, I call, catastrophize about it. You do not need to tell the audience what's going on in your head. You don't need to say, oh, I forgot what I was going to say next, or oh, what was I talking about? You just breathe and smile. And one of our trainers, who is a former BBC presenter, she says the one thing you're taught to do very early on in your career is whatever's happening, you just keep smiling and keep your eye on the camera. I thought that's such wonderful advice from Deborah. So, yeah, smile and wander through. The thing about hands, we have to learn sometimes what to do with our hands. I'm talking with my hands as I'm on this webinar now, and we need to have our hands. They are part of us. But we also sometimes need to learn to have them relaxed by our side or just held gently in front too. Again, video yourself, watch the playback, and then you can do something about it. And I think Catherine's telling me I've got time up now, so I'm going to hand you back to her. Here you go.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And also thank you very much to, you know, all of our audience today, because we've had some very, very good questions come in. And on our webinar, we do give a longer time for the questions and answer session. So then, you know, they will all get answered on our next hour webinar, or if not, we will send you a sheet of answers to the questions out. Just couple more important dates for your diary is our HR Forum webinars, and our next one being on the 30th of April with a barrister, Hilary Winston from the Old Square Chamber, on disability discrimination. And so it's really our exit survey. I really encourage you all to fill out our exit survey. It just, you know, gives you a chance to help us shape up, you know, future masterclass minis, and so you can indicate, you know, what you would like to be put into them, and also what training you may need for your company or yourself. So if you can fill that in, that would be good. And I would just, as I said, I'd like to thank Isobel for a brilliant session this morning, and like to thank you all for joining us. We do hope you found it all useful, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you very much.